Act 1. The hook, the billion-dollar hostage, and the stripping of humanity. Picture this scenario in your mind. You are standing in the exact center of a Super Bowl stadium. Tens of thousands of people are screaming your name, creating a deafening roar that literally makes the ground beneath your feet violently shake. The camera flashes are going off relentlessly, creating a blinding wall of white light. You are the ultimate American success story, the undisputed cash cow of a multi-billion-dollar entertainment industry. Millions of people across the globe desperately wish they could live your life for just one single day. But the exact second you step backstage and the heavy velvet ropes close behind you, the brutal reality sets in. You collapse onto a chair, completely drained. Surrounding you is not a warm, loving family. You are encircled by a heavily armed team of corporate managers, company-hired psychiatrists, security guards, and even your own flesh and blood. The terrifying problem is, they do not look at you as a human being with a soul and emotions. In their eyes, you are a walking stock ticker, a piece of highly lucrative collateral damage that must be ruthlessly exploited until the very last drop of energy is extracted. You cry out that you are exhausted. They silently hand you an unmarked pill to artificially shock your nervous system awake. You break down in tears and beg for a hiatus. They immediately threaten to destroy your entire career, sue you for breach of contract, and completely take away your custody rights to your children. When you desperately try to reach out for external help, they utilize their massive wealth to pay off the tabloids, manipulating the narrative to tell the entire world that you are experiencing severe delusions and need to be locked away for your own good. Welcome to the absolute darkest side of the American dream. Today, we are meticulously dissecting one of the most sophisticated psychological manipulation machines in human history. We are not talking about cheap, everyday romantic gaslighting. We are diving deep into the terrifying realm of institutional betrayal, a place where the most powerful corporate entities legally collude to brainwash, entrap, and strip away the fundamental human rights of global icons right in front of the eyes of billions of spectators. Act 2. The Judy Garland Blueprint and the Concept of Identity Foreclosure. To fully comprehend how high-level celebrity manipulation operates with such devastating efficiency, we must turn back the wheel of time to the golden age of Hollywood. This era serves as the birthplace of the original manipulation blueprint, famously known through the tragic life of Judy Garland. She was a global cinematic treasure, forever immortalized by her iconic role in The Wizard of Oz. However, hidden behind those glittering Technicolor cinematic frames is a horrific clinical masterclass in medical abuse and systemic psychological grooming. The Hollywood elite and studio tycoons rely on a standardized, ruthless playbook for controlling generational talent. The very first step in this destructive cycle is recognized by clinical psychologists as identity foreclosure. When Judy was merely 16 years old, the powerful executives at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer launched a relentless psychological assault against her. They viciously attacked her physical appearance on a daily basis, cruelly labeling her as a fat little pig surrounded by breathtakingly beautiful supporting actresses. These were not accidental insults. This is the most fundamental, calculated technique of self-esteem destruction designed to shatter the victim's individual ego. When the supreme authority of your entire universe constantly gaslights you regarding your fundamental self-worth, repeatedly hammering into your brain that you are nothing, your mind automatically develops a defense mechanism of absolute submission. You genuinely start to believe that you are worthless, hideous, and can only survive if you obediently follow their exact molding and instructions. Even more horrifyingly, to force a teenage girl to endure grueling 18-hour work shifts on a movie set, the studios implemented a highly toxic medical control regimen. They aggressively forced amphetamines into her system to artificially stimulate her central nervous system, keeping her wired and awake. When the cameras finally stopped rolling at night, she physically could not sleep due to the severe side effects of the stimulants. At this point, the studio fixers would shove powerful barbiturates down her throat to chemically knock her brain out, granting her a few hours of medically induced unconsciousness before the hellish cycle repeated the next morning. They completely eradicated the bodily autonomy of a developing child. Psychological manipulation at the absolute highest corporate level is not about holding a weapon to someone's head and demanding compliance. Peak manipulation is about biologically rewiring the victim's neurochemistry, transforming them into a dependent addict who relies entirely on their abusers to provide the very substances keeping them alive. Judy Garland tragically passed away from an accidental overdose decades later, but the corporate machine effectively murdered her spirit when she was just 16. Act 3. The Savior Complex and Lou Pearlman's Theater of Betrayal. Transitioning into the 1990s, this manipulation machine evolved into an even more insidious form, heavily utilizing the savior complex. During this era, the system abandoned the tactic of hurling vicious insults. Instead, the predators disguised themselves in the comforting cloak of paternal love. No one executed this theatrical performance more flawlessly than Lou Pearlman, the infamous music mogul behind two of the biggest boy bands in history, the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. Lou Pearlman did not approach these vulnerable young men waving cold, intimidating legal documents. He deployed a highly calculated psychological manipulation tactic known as trauma bonding. The vast majority of the members in these vocal groups originated from working-class backgrounds, carrying an intense, burning desire to change their families' financial destinies. Lou Pearlman strategically positioned himself as a literal messiah. He chartered private jets to fly them to exotic locations, invited them to live in his sprawling mega mansion, and hosted extravagant pizza parties to win their hearts. He deliberately referred to them as his own sons. When you are a vulnerable teenager navigating the treacherous waters of the entertainment industry, having an immensely wealthy and powerful male figure offer total protection triggers massive releases of oxytocin in the brain, forging an incredibly strong, blinding bond of loyalty. Lou Pearlman successfully positioned himself as the only trusted adult in their chaotic universe. And at the precise zenith of that unwavering trust, he presented them with dense, 70-page contracts overflowing with incomprehensible legal jargon. Severely manipulated by a profound sense of gratitude and obligation, the young men obediently signed their lives away without a trace of suspicion. The devastating aftermath was that while the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC sold tens of millions of records and performed in sold-out arenas globally, the band members received absolute poverty wages. Lou Pearlman systematically pocketed hundreds of millions of dollars in tour and merchandise revenue. When the elaborate Ponzi scheme finally collapsed, the most agonizing pain for the victims was not the lost wealth, but the complete destruction of their core trust. The man they affectionately called a father, the man who comforted them, was actually a cold-blooded parasite draining their life force. That is the true cruelty of affinity fraud. Act 4. The era of mob mentality, reactive abuse under the flashing lights. As we crossed into the 21st century, this sinister manipulation machine became fully weaponized with the aggressive assistance of mass media. The ultimate challenge facing the elite power structures now was a daunting one. How do you completely control an independent, fiercely successful adult woman who commands hundreds of millions of dollars? The psychological warfare answer is brutally simple. You systematically prove to the entire world that she is a raving, unstable lunatic. And the most heartbreakingly perfect target for this modern smear campaign was the Princess of Pop, Britney Spears. The year 2007 stands as the year American pop culture witnessed the most barbaric psychological public execution broadcast across mass media. The haunting images of Britney shaving her own head and furiously attacking a paparazzi vehicle with a green umbrella completely dominated the front pages of every major tabloid. The global audience collectively mocked her suffering. Late-night comedians shamelessly used her mental collapse as a cheap punchline. However, when analyzed through the lens of behavioral psychology and victimology, this is a textbook, tragic demonstration of reactive abuse. The psychological mechanism of reactive abuse operates exactly like a sealed pressure cooker placed on maximum heat. The abusers continuously provoke, instigate, and systematically strip away every basic human right in the dark shadows where nobody is watching. Swarms of ruthless paparazzi relentlessly stalked her into public restrooms. Flashbulbs exploded in her face nonstop, intentionally causing severe sensory overload and disorientation. Her own family actively colluded with her management team to aggressively isolate her from any genuine friends or allies. When a human being is subjected to chronic, extreme levels of stress over a prolonged period, the amygdala in the brain essentially short circuits. This is the brain's primary fear processing center. The amygdala violently hijacks executive functioning, throwing the victim into a permanent state of fight or flight. Eventually, your central nervous system simply snaps and you explode. You scream, you lose absolute control, you take desperate, chaotic actions in a frantic attempt to establish boundaries and repel the predators invading your personal space. At the exact second the victim fiercely retaliates, the very abusers who push them to the brink take a strategic step backward, perfectly playing the role of innocent bystanders. They point their high-definition lenses directly at the victim's agonized, distorted face and broadcast it globally with a clear message. Look at this. We did absolutely nothing. She just went completely crazy on her own. The victim's desperate, survival-based retaliation is grotesquely distorted and weaponized as concrete evidence against their own sanity. The profound truth that society must internalize is that Brittany did not spontaneously lose her mind. The act of smashing that car with an umbrella was a completely normal, biological trauma response of a human being being hunted and cornered by dozens of aggressive, shouting men on a daily basis. But a ruthless world does not care about nuance or context. It only craves sensational imagery. And those carefully curated images of insanity flawlessly pave the way for the most draconian legal manipulation in modern legal history. Act 5. Learned Helplessness and the Atrocity of Reproductive Coercion. In the year 2008, a highly controversial legal arrangement known as a conservatorship was forcibly imposed upon the pop star's life. This is a specific legal tool in the United States, originally established for humanitarian purposes, strictly designed for elderly individuals suffering from severe, late-stage dementia or patients in vegetative states who cannot feed themselves. Shockingly, this exact legal cage was clamped down onto a global superstar who was actively memorizing dozens of complex choreographies and headlining massive international stadium tours. At this specific juncture, psychological manipulation reached its most terrifying evolutionary stage because it was no longer a shadowy, underhanded tactic. It was fully sanctioned and protected by the judicial system itself. In clinical psychology, this specific state of inescapable entrapment is classified as learned helplessness. This groundbreaking concept was famously discovered by psychologist Martin Seligman. Imagine you are locked inside a steel cage equipped with an electrified floor. Every single time you attempt to climb the walls to reach freedom, you are blasted with a painful electric shock. After enduring hundreds of desperate attempts and receiving nothing but agonizing punishment, your brain completely breaks down. Eventually, even if the abusers throw the cage doors wide open and permanently disconnect the power supply, you will just sit frozen, curled up in the corner. You stop trying to escape because your brain has learned a permanent, brutal lesson. Every single attempt at resistance is utterly futile and only results in more severe punishment. For 13 grueling years, the legendary singer was held completely hostage by the massive empire generated by her own sweat and tears. She was legally forbidden from driving her own car, she was banned from marrying the man she loved, and her personal cell phone was heavily bugged to monitor every private text message. Her medical privacy rights were completely obliterated. But the absolute horrific climax of this systemic manipulation and gross human rights violation was reproductive coercion. She was legally forced to keep an intrauterine contraceptive device inside her body and was strictly denied permission to visit a doctor to have it removed. The justification was chillingly corporate. Her legally appointed handlers simply did not want their billion-dollar Las Vegas residency schedule interrupted by the inconvenience of a pregnancy and maternity leave. They successfully engineered a massive state of cognitive dissonance. On one hand, they continuously filed massive stacks of legal paperwork to the court, swearing under oath that she was severely mentally incapacitated, so incredibly ill that she lacked the cognitive function to buy a simple cup of coffee. On the exact same hand, those very same individuals aggressively forced that supposedly incapacitated woman to execute hundreds of high-intensity, physically exhausting concerts, raking in billions of dollars to financially sustain the very bureaucratic machine keeping her imprisoned. When the justice system, an institution inherently designed to protect the vulnerable, turns its back and actively participates in gaslighting your reality, the fragile boundary between solid truth and horrifying madness completely disintegrates. Act 6. Outro: the collapse of the smoke and mirrors. The global Free Britney movement that subsequently exploded across the internet was not merely a passionate fan club defending their favorite pop idol. It carried a much more profound macroeconomic significance. It was a mass, global uprising against systemic, institutionalized power abuse. In late 2021, crushed under the massive weight of public outrage and undeniable documentary evidence, the conservatorship was finally and legally terminated. For the very first time in over 13 years, that woman was allowed to physically hold the keys to her own vehicle. But we all silently acknowledge a very bitter truth. No human being can walk away from a psychological prison camp that lasted over a decade while keeping their soul entirely intact. The deep neurological and emotional trauma inflicted by the system is permanent. The paramount lesson to extract from the glittering, neon-lit underworld of Hollywood is absolutely chilling. Systemic psychological manipulation does not stop at the petty lies and gaslighting of a toxic romantic partner. When psychological abuse is combined with bottomless capitalist greed, the massive influence of corporate media, and lethal loopholes within the legal system, it metamorphoses into a weapon of mass destruction. It is uniquely dangerous because it always cloaks itself in the pristine white coats of medical protection and the sacred guise of familial love to legally justify stealing a human being's soul. Therefore, the very next time you gaze up at a billboard and see a global superstar smiling radiantly and dancing flawlessly under a blinding spotlight, take a brief moment to remember this. Sometimes, the brighter and more dazzling the stage lights shining upon them, the deeper and darker the shadows acting as their chains.